Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing my June wrap-up. Alright guys, so June was a very interesting reading month. I feel like it started off really strong, and then towards the end of the month, I just couldn't find any books that I really connected with. And I feel like some of that has to do with just my mental health. I am leaving where I was working and moving to a new district, so I was just dealing with like all of the emotions that go with that, and I just didn't feel like reading. So I feel like I was forcing myself to read, and that just is never a good idea. So while I did enjoy a lot of the books I read in June, none of them were really like standout reads besides one. So yeah, I'm still excited to talk about these books with you guys because I think you'll be able to find a really good fantasy romance rec. Most of the books were fantasy romance. I had one dark like rom-com type book and then one Mafia romance. But overall, I'm excited to talk about these books with you guys. Now, if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon, all linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about all the books that I read in June. So starting off with my Patreon fantasy romance pick for June, we have The Ever King by L.J. Andrews. So this was actually a reread for me, and I am so happy my Patreons voted for this book. I think I rated it 4 stars the first time I read it, but honestly on my reread, it might be 4.5. I love the love interest in this book so much. If you're unfamiliar with this book, we are following Eric, and he is the Prince of the Ever. He was locked away since he was a small boy by the person that murdered his father, and all he wants is vengeance, which ends up happening when the daughter of the person that locked Eric away ends up accidentally releasing him. So he takes her captive, and it's their romance, and it is so good. So if you like pirates, sirens, Vikings, all of that, and fae, this book would be perfect for you. And I have said this, I think in my last like 10 videos, that if you like the Shatter Me series, this guy, the love interest, gives me such Aaron Warner vibes in the best possible way. So if you have not read this yet, highly recommend. I know there is a companion novel that just released. I think it's called The Mist Thief, possibly. I could be totally wrong. So I will definitely be checking that out. I still have to read the sequel, which I will be reading in July, The Ever Queen, and I am so excited. Next up, I read a book that has been on my TBR since the beginning of the year, and I finally just picked it up on a whim, and it is A Court This Cruel and Lovely. And one, I think my expectations going into this book were just a little bit too high, and two, I can't really pinpoint why I just didn't feel connected to this story. Overall, it was very enjoyable, and on paper, it has everything that I love in fantasy romance, but I think it was just too similar to so many other fantasy romance that I've read recently that like I kept getting it mixed up with other books. And yeah, so unfortunately, I think I only rate this like 3.5 stars, but there's so many other content creators and friends I have that love this series. So I definitely think it's worth giving a shot. If you don't know what this book is about, we are following this girl that lives in a world where when you are very young, like still a baby, you give up your power to these gods that are supposed to protect this community from fae and from like the evil of the world. So our main character did not give up her power when she was a baby, so she has this secret power, and if it's found that she has it, she will be killed. So at the very beginning of this book, it actually opens with someone that they discover has this power, and I'm pretty sure she's like set on fire. Like it's a very gruesome way to die. Anyway, very early in this book, it is found out that our main character does have this power, so she has to flee for her life, and she ends up running into this guy that she's been having dreams of, and he essentially tells her that if she will help him get into this castle because she does have a very strong magical ability that he will help train her in her magic. And it kind of goes from there. And overall, there were parts of this that I really enjoyed. And I think the pacing is great. It really hooks you right away. I just couldn't get into it, and I don't know why, and I'm very annoyed by that. So I might actually go back and try to reread this when I have a little bit more time and my TBR isn't insane, because I feel like I would love this. I just had a lot of trouble every time I put this story down picking it back up. So if you read this, let me know. What do you think? Should I continue with the series? But overall, a very solid fantasy romance. I just didn't love it. And the next fantasy romance was my favorite read of the month, and I've talked about it in the 2 previous videos, so I'm not going to go too in-depth on the plot, but it is The Last Lost Girl by Casey L. Bond, and one of the best Peter Pan reimaginings I've ever read. So this story is following a girl that was an orphan until she was found by her older sister named Belle. Now, Belle is a little bit out of it. She is obsessed with the story of Peter Pan. Anytime she sees a copy of this book, she has to take it home with her. She also seems to have some mind control abilities, and there seems to be an evil shadow that sometimes will possess her. But other than that, she has been a great kind of like mother figure to our main character. However, one day Belle, after having a really bad bout of insanity, tells our main character that she has to go back to Neverland, and our main character can't follow her because it is dangerous, because Peter Pan is evil. And our main character thinks her sister is insane. That is until her sister turns into somebody and flies away. And our main character ends up jumping on her and follows her to Neverland, where we find out who her sister actually is, and we soon learn everything there is to know about Neverland. So the story kind of goes from there. We are introduced to Captain Hook, who ends up saving our main character and kind of describes what is going on and what our main character needs to do to escape Neverland. But while all this is going on, there's this really cool like amnesia plotline where when you go to Neverland, you kind of lose your memories. So our main characters, or all of our characters, are trying to help each other remember. So honestly, everyone in this book is an unreliable narrator because no one really has memories of what went on. And I just loved that. And this is coming from someone who doesn't love amnesia tropes, but it worked so unbelievably well in this book, and I just really enjoyed it. So if you have not read this yet, I highly, highly recommend. The only caveat to this book is there is no sequel yet, and I don't know when the next one's going to come out. So this does end on quite a cliffhanger, so know that going in. But other than that, I love this book, and please, please pick it up if you haven't yet. And next up I read What Did You Do?, which is the sequel to How Does It Feel? Now, I can't go too much into the plot of What Did You Do because it does spoil this book, but if you're unfamiliar with How Does It Feel, we're following this girl who is obsessed with winged creatures after she sees a fairy, or what she believes is a fairy, when she is quite young. And one day when she is out trying to save this endangered moth, she falls into the Unseelie Court, where she is almost killed multiple times by the Prince of the Unseelie Court. And it goes from there, and it is crazy. There are monsters. It is a wild, wild time. Now, the second book, What Did You Do? I will say, it has its issues. I will give it that. It definitely needed a little bit more editing. Some transitions kind of felt like they came out of nowhere. However, the book was fun, and I will 100% say I enjoyed every minute of that book. Now, once again, it is not going to be for everybody. I think there are definitely issues. I also listened to the audiobook. I don't even know if the physical book's been released yet. For some reason, the audio came out months before the physical book, and I think that helped a lot. I think if I was reading it physically, which I probably wouldn't do anyway, but I would have struggled even more because there were times I was listening to this book and we just like completely jumped from like one setting to another without any explanation of how we got from point A to point B, which is like one of my biggest issues I have when I'm reading. But other than that, besides needing a little bit more editing, besides that it really didn't have very much foreshadowing, I keep saying negatives, but I can't stress enough, it was fun. It was such a fun, crazy love triangle with all of these interesting characters, and I just had a great time with it. So I'm rating it 4 stars. Not everyone is going to rate it that. I just thought it was really fun, and I'm very excited for the next book. I feel like the next book is completely going to go in another direction that I might not like as much. So I have a feeling I'm not going to love the next book as much as book 2. However, it might surprise me. It might end up working out. So I'm sorry. I feel like this review is not very polished at all because I could see the glaring issues with this book, but I still just really, really enjoyed it. So overall, I liked it. I don't know if I recommend it, but it was a really fun time. I feel like this is the video where your faith in me as a reviewer just goes out the window, because this next fantasy romance, so many of you have recommended, and I know it is so loved, and for some reason it just didn't work for me, and that is Trial of the Sun Queen. Now, there were parts of this I did enjoy. I will say before I get into the premise that I read this right after A Court This Cruel and Lovely, and similar to that book, I really can't pinpoint why this book really didn't work for me. I just think I read them both at a bad time. I was also mixing them up, and they're not that similar. It's just I feel like both books use a lot of very common romantasy tropes, and because I read them back to back, it just kind of hurt my enjoyment. But this one is following a girl that lives a really rough life under the Aurora King. She's essentially living in almost like a prison with her siblings, and she's lived there since she was very, very young. And most people don't survive very long, so she kind of has like a reputation as being a badass in this really bad environment. Now, she ends up doing something that causes her to be put in isolation. And while she's there, and we kind of assume that she might pass away in this like isolation area, she hears a fight break out and she ends up being taken while this is going on and wakes up in the Sun Kingdom and finds out that she has to compete against 9 other women to try to earn the love and favor of the Sun King. And if she does this, she'll be able to hopefully save her family that is back under the rule of the Aurora King. And it goes from there. So I will say I love the trial elements in this book. Anytime there was a trial, I was completely hooked. It was just pretty much everything that came before and after that I did not care about. So I did like the very beginning of seeing their lives under the Aurora King. And honestly, also similar to A Court This Cruel and Lovely, I was sucked in right away. I loved everything that went on with that. But as soon as our main character is taken to the Sun Kingdom, the entire tone of this book kind of shifts, which I'm sure is purposeful. I just didn't love it. So it then became our main character. I feel like the main character we had in the very beginning really changes in the second half of the book, and she kind of becomes more naive, and she was making decisions that really got on my nerves. So overall, I don't know if I'll continue with this series. I feel like I ended up liking A Curse This Cruel and Lovely a little bit more. This one, while I liked the trial elements, like that was all that really stood out for me. So I don't know. I don't know if I'll continue. Let me know in the comments if you finish this series, what you think. But overall, I wish I loved this just a little bit more. And last up for fantasy romance, I reread Gild by Raymond Kennedy. This is the first book in the Plated Prisoner series. I want to do a full reread of the series before I read Gold. I know that released a while ago, but the audiobook never released. So I have forgotten a lot of what happens. And honestly, it was really, really refreshing jumping back into this world because I remember when I first read this book, I hated it. I hated the main character. She got on my nerves, but then I continued and it's one of my favorite fantasy romance series. So if you have never read the Plated Prisoner series, I have a full spoiler-free vlog. I'll leave in the cards and the description, but this is following RN and she lives in Midas's castle. So Midas, like the original tale, has the ability to turn anything he touches into gold, and he has gold touched RN, and she's just terrified of life. So she lives in this gilded cage and really only cares about being subservient to Midas and being safe. And all of that changes when she is forced to leave her cage and travel to another kingdom where she is captured, and it goes from there. And I just love the growth of the main character throughout this series. She does such a 180 in terms of just her strength and her autonomy, and I love her so, so much. So if you have not read the Plated Prisoner series, one of my favorite fantasy romances, and I highly recommend. And the last 2 books are both dark romance. So first up we have Leather and Lark, which is the 3rd book in the Ruinous love trilogy by Brynne Weaver. The first book being Butcher and Blackbird, which is one of my top reads of last year. Dark romance, serial killer, rom-com, amazing banter and spice. It was just so, so good. So I had very high expectations for this book going in. Unfortunately, I didn't love this book quite as much as Butcher and Blackbird. And a lot of that had to do with the romance, and the plot kind of felt all over the place. So in this story, it is Grumpy Sunshine. We are following Lachlan, who is this guy that disposes of bodies. I'm sure there's a name for that. I can't think of it at the moment. And Lark, who is this indie singer who also has a bit of a vigilante, like serial killer streak. But anyway, she ends up killing somebody, needs the body disposed of, calls up Lachlan's company. They send him. These two immediately do not get along. They end up having a very bad first impression, which is very upsetting because later down the line, Lark realizes that in order to save her best friend's husband, she needs to fake or really marry Lachlan, who is his brother. And they are going to be in this like arranged marriage until they can figure out who is trying to like bring down one of these companies. And it kind of goes from there. So anyway, it's kind of these two in this arranged marriage, Grumpy Sunshine. And while there were parts that I enjoyed, it just didn't have the same feel as Butcher and Blackbird. Like I said, the plot kind of felt all over the place. There's a villain that pops up like mid-book that I just wasn't expecting and kind of felt like he came out of nowhere. And I will say, I was talking to Bex from Bex Reads. I hope she doesn't mind me bringing this up. I don't think she will. But we both listened to the audiobook. The laugh tracks in this book are so kind of cringy. They're so cringy. And I don't know if it's because I listen to books at like 2.5, 2.75 speed, and maybe it's less cringy if you're listening to it at regular speed, but also this singing was just, it was not it. So that was the only parts of the narration I didn't like, because I think both of these narrators do an amazing job. I actually highly recommend the audiobook. It's just the laughing and the singing did not work for me. So yeah, that was unfortunate. Let me know if you listened to the audiobook, what did you think? Or the laughs just felt like they were recorded somewhere else. It was just odd. Anyway, unfortunately, I didn't love this one as much as the first book, but I still think it was a fun, enjoyable time. So definitely check it out. As I'm filming this, I'm realizing that this is probably one of the most negative videos I've ever had, so I kind of apologize for that. I try not to be negative and try to point out everything I like in a book. I'll be honest, but I just feel like this has been one negative review after another, so I am sorry. Hopefully I love all of the books I read in July, but luckily this last book is a 5-star read, and that is because it is the 7th book in the Perfectly Imperfect Mafia romance series, and I love all of these books. I will say, anytime one of these audiobooks drops, I can count on having at least a 4 to 5-star read, just because I love this series so much. If you are unfamiliar with the Perfectly Imperfect Mafia romance series, it is a dark mafia romance series, and we are following these characters that all have either disability or chronic illness rep, and the books are super short, but you still get really attached to the characters. Now, I will say, Book 7, Burned Dreams, it has a very different feel from the previous books, and I think it's because the hero in this wants to kill the main girl in the beginning, which is different than all of the other books. So let me start from the beginning. We are following this girl that, because of her younger brother's bad gambling debts, she's forced to marry this guy high up in the mafia who is horribly abusive and just beats her and treats her terribly. However, no one else really knows this because she covers it with makeup and things like that. So the guy that she is married to ended up doing something to the hero of this book that now he wants revenge. And he's gonna get revenge by killing this guy's wife, who happens to be our main character. So he, through some maneuvering, is able to become her personal guard, and it's their story. So as he's guarding this girl and kind of plotting her death, he's slowly realizing that there might be more to her that meets the eye, and maybe she didn't want this marriage, and it goes from there. So I really enjoyed it. I cannot wait for the next book to come out via audio. I love this series. All right, guys, those are all the books I read in June. Please let me know down in the comments below if you have read any of the books I mentioned. And I'd like to say a huge thank you to my Paladin protectors, Amanda, Erin, Leslie, and Kat. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel. And thank you guys all for watching this video. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye.